CARS, controlled articular rotations, is the practice of moving your joints through its greatest rotational range of motion. The daily morning routine of CARS will help with joint health, longevity, and the future success in training. Important rules about CARS: 1, it must be pain-free, and number 2, we want minimal movement from neighboring joints. And we do this by irradiating, and we build a co-contraction throughout the body at 10 to 30% intensity. And this helps isolate that targeted joint that we're working on.
Starting with the neck car, we're going to flex the head forward and then start to rotate. Laterally flex, trying to get that ear past the shoulder, and then follow the eyes up to the ceiling extension. Dip that left ear past the shoulder, and then rotating over that shoulder as much as you can, bringing that shin in contact with that collarbone, scraping back to the center, and repeat those steps. Being mindful of not to move the lower body, and we don't want any compensating by hiking the shoulders up towards those ears. For spinal CARS, we're going to cross our hands over top, flexing forward, making sure not to move our waist down, rotate as much as we can, and then laterally flex, come into extension, laterally flex the spine, rotating, and then flexing forward, stacking back up one piece of vertebrae at a time, repeating this process back to the left, laterally flex, extension, lateral flexion, rotation, the whole time being aware of those hips and lower body, making sure they're not moving at all. Shoulder blade CARS, start with the arms straight, hands by the sides, retract the shoulder blades, start to elevate them up, protract at the top, separating them as much as you can, slide them down separated, retract again, bringing them together at the bottom, elevating up, separating at the top, keeping them separated, sliding down, and then bringing them back together. Now we're going to repeat that process, go in the opposite direction. Some compensations to the note for is the bending of the elbows, hands coming off the hips, and rotating of the spine. Shoulder CARS, start by solidifying the body, start to flex the arm up to the overhead position, hitting that roadblock, internally rotate, and start to reach back behind, keeping that arm up as high as you can, hitting extension, and then slowly lowering the arm down towards the hip, palm facing out away, in internal rotation, reach back behind, opening up, coming back up overhead, lowering through the midline, back down to the start. Some compensations to note for is bending in the wrist, bending in the elbow, rotating the upper body, or laterally bending through the torso to try to get the arm more overhead. Elbow cars start by squeezing the upper arm towards the ribs with the opposite hand at the elbow. Start with the forearm supinated, so palm facing up towards the ceiling. Bend the elbow coming up towards the top, and then rotate as much as you can, palm facing away from the body, and then slowly extend down. Repeat, coming the opposite, pronate all the way up, and then extend into supination. The whole time, try not to rotate the upper arm or laterally bending the upper body. All the rotation comes from the elbow down. For elbow cars, we're gonna bend that elbow 90 degrees and park it right next to the rib cage. We can place a cell phone or an object on the top of our forearm for external feedback, because we don't want to rotate and spill that object off the forearm. And then we start to perform our wrist cars. We want to make sure to keep a nice neutral hand, no weird excessive finger movements. Repeat in that circular fashion, and then start to go into the opposite direction. Standing hip cars. Start with the upper body nice and tall, base leg completely straight. Drive the knee up towards the chest. Open that door, hit that roadblock, internally rotate, scraping the heel up as high as you can. Slowly lower that knee and ankle back into the midline together. And then rewind, bring that knee and ankle out away from the body. Externally rotate, driving the knee up towards the armpit. Close that door and lower. Some compensation to note for is any flexion or folding of the chest, bending of that base leg, and try not to let the pelvis or that base hip rotate, only getting movement from that working hip. Knee cars. Here we're trying to internally and externally rotate the tibia or that shin bone independently from the upper leg. So you can see the shin is actually rotating internally and externally. Once we've got that down, we can bring the hip up into flexion. We can support ourselves either way by grabbing the upper leg and bringing it towards the chest. From there, we're going to externally rotate the shin, straighten the knee out. Before that knee gets to the top locked out position, internally rotate and then bend the knee coming back in. When doing these cars, note that the shin is actually rotating at that top position. For the ankle, we'll build that irradiation, and then now we're going to try to disassociate the shin from the ankle. So place our fingers on top of that shin bone so we get a little bit of feedback, knowing if that shin starts to move. We don't want any movement from that shin. And then we take that ankle through that circular fashion, noting for any compensations from that upper leg, working through the biggest circle possible, couple reps clockwise and then a couple reps counterclockwise. All right, we're working toes. Obviously, we're not going to be able to make circles, but we still want to work the toes to get some type of feedback and sensory input towards the feet. So we'll start by keeping all the toes down, lifting the great toes up, and then tapping back down, lifting up, tapping back down, and then we keep our big toes glued to the ground, lifting the little toes off. Note the compensation of the heel, the arches collapsing and those ankles coming in towards the midline. Don't let that happen. Now we're going to bring all the toes up off the ground, and we tap only the great toes, lifting up, tapping the great toes, lifting up. Good. And then same thing, tapping the little toes, keeping the great toes up off the ground.